We lost the truth somewhere along the way when we started telling people that your identity is okay. We started letting people identify as whatever they wanted. This is not political. I am not saying the identities in which people choose are right or wrong, acceptable or not acceptable, whatever. I am saying the overall mechanism of identity itself is the problem. We have put so much emphasis on identity because we think that we need to say who we are in the world, and that needs to be acknowledged, because that is one of everybody's biggest fears, is that they don't actually know who they are, and because they don't know who they are, they think it's possible they might be nobody. They might be nobody if they can't figure out who they are. They might just not be anybody at all. And everybody has that fear somewhere in there. And I do, you do, everybody does, whether they admit it or not. You tango with that fear at least a couple times in your developing life. And so the mistake that we have made is we have tried to go from witnessing and validating the human experience so that it has room to blossom naturally. We've gone from that, or trying to do that, to saying identity is the goal. Identity is the thing. This identity. Find out who you are. That's a question you never get to answer, because who you are is not one thing. Who you are is not one thing at one time. You are a dynamic human experience if you allow yourself to be. I have been, yes, there are certain parts of my personality that have stuck forever, but I have been a certain thing at a certain time when I was 10. I've been a certain thing at a certain time when I was 16. I've been, who I am is not describable because there's too many pieces and some of them change over time. So when I declare, put my foot in the sand, draw a line and say, this is who I am, it's not that what you say you are is wrong. It's that you said anything at all. That's the problem. And this is hard for people to understand. It was hard for me to understand because I thought, I was so wrapped up in my identity as a fighter, as somebody who was strong, as somebody who could get through things, as somebody who could handle stuff, as a strong man, whatever that meant to me at a time, that I didn't allow the weaker parts of me to live and breathe. I shut them down. I said, no, that's not who I am. I am strong. I am not weak. I will not be weak because that's not who I am. But the weak parts of you, the ugly parts of you, the uncomfortable parts of you that none of us want to look at, that none of us want to admit because we are so wrapped up in identifying as something that we feel like if we allow something to be felt, if we allow things that we don't like to be true, they are who we are. They think that what we feel is who we are. I feel like I was born in the wrong body. Okay, that might be true. In fact, it's probably true. I've known somebody. I've been on the fence with the transgender thing because at one point I think it's a severe mental illness that is miscategorized. But on the other hand, I know people and have known people since kindergarten who were boys, who dressed as girls, talked like girls, were basically a girl. To me, that's too young for you to make that up in your mind as some sort of mental illness. So I don't agree with either one. Finally, I agree that you may feel a certain way about who you think you are. That's fine. I invite you to explore that to its depths, but to put a line in the sand and say, this is who I am, you must accept the thing that I think I am and everything that comes with that, because if you don't, what you're really doing is you are invalidating me as a human by not agreeing with the thing that I think I am. But you don't know who you are, so you're just taking a really good guess, and then other people have to look at this guess and go, this is who this person says they are. And they treat you according to your identity, and that treatment is dictated by the societal response to that identity. It's not that trans mask is treated a certain way because it's trans mask. It's treated that way because trans mask is looked at a certain way by society. So you are outsourcing who you are to the ever-changing landscape of culture. Cultural norms change. they evolve, they fizzle, they flip 180. You are outsourcing one of your deepest fears of not knowing who you are. You're outsourcing that to a mob that is fickle and dynamic and not stable and volatile. That's what's happening. That's why there's so many issues. And it's not just transgenders, and it's not just, LGBTQ. It's every identity across the board. I'm a fisherman. Well, you're more than a fisherman. I'm just a blue collar guy. You're more than a blue collar guy, right? What is blue collar guy? Give me the list. Do you find that you play the fucking xylophone? Well, blue collar guy doesn't play the xylophone, but you do. So now there's a disconnect because now you're hiding a piece of you because you're not allowing it to be expressed publicly because it doesn't fit your identity. I don't know, fucking blue collar guy, xylophone, whatever. I don't know. It's just the first thing I thought of. But the point is, identity is a huge trap. Identity is necessary in development because when you're growing up as a child, you're confronted with that ginormous question of who are you? Who are you? And so you make your way in the world by trying to figure out who you are. And that is supposed to happen. It is supposed to happen. That is why most of these identity issues are in high schools, are in middle schools, are in college. Right? Because that is the time of the human experience where you are trying to figure out who you are. But that is not the end all be all. That is not your sentence for life. It is not the sentence that you can give yourself for life. You can't give it to yourself. It's not going to work because you eventually need to try to figure out who you are so much that you end up realizing you are so much more than any one thing or any category of things that you could put yourself inside of. And you should be. And if you're not, if you fit an identity perfectly, it is probably because you are so afraid of yourself that you don't allow yourself to explore the things that should be outside, that would be outside this identity you proclaim. You don't allow yourself to be yourself because your identity is a shield. It's a necessary shield when you're young to protect you from humiliation of who you actually are, rejection of who you actually are, dislike of who you actually are because you don't know who you are. So if you show up how you think you should be and then everybody hates you, then who are you? You are a hateable person. And as a young person, that can last for a lifetime. And so you pick up a shield because the mob gives power to the shield, and you hide behind the shield of the mob or societal's interpretation of the identity that is your shield, and you move forward and you let that protect you, and you never show who you are outside of that shield because you're protecting everything. And that makes sense because nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to get hurt, so they protect themselves from hurt. That is the human experience. But it's also the human experience that you do get hurt. And it's good that that's the human experience because things work in contrast, whether it's black and white, yin and yang, male and female, right? There is only one because there is the other. There is only joy and love and peace because there is misery and terror and pain. The space between them gives the power to each one of them. And you cannot take one away. Otherwise, the other loses that contrast and becomes neutral. And that is why people who do not allow themselves to feel, deep levels of pain and suffering cannot find happiness in life because they don't have the contrast. And it makes sense because you don't want to get hurt. But if you always protect yourself from getting hurt, you will never have that contrast that will give the weight to your positive experiences, and you will wonder why you might feel like you're depressed. Well, it's because you don't allow yourself to get hurt by being who you are, standing alone in a world of billions, not proclaiming anything, not putting a banner up with a sigil, not with a shield, standing naked before the universe, not saying anything, taking it all. Because that is the human spirit, is to be one amongst many. Not one inside of a cluster, and these clusters, move together. I'm not saying, don't ever be with people, or don't be a part of a group, or don't be a part of this, or don't be a part of that. I'm saying the group's strength is made up of the strength of all the different uniquenesses of the people in the group. You are who you are, but you don't know who you are. And you never really will find it out because it's so varied and there's so many pieces and everything is so different from everybody else that you can't put a label on it. And so when you try, you run into all these problems. It's not that identity is political. It's not that I don't think that you should be able to identify as whatever you want. I don't think we should try to identify as things. And on top of that, I think we should give room for young people to attempt, but then be there as an example that you don't need an identity. You don't need one. Yes, you should try because you're going to try anyways. That's the natural essence of a human, is to try to find an individual route in the world. But eventually, you got to be the example that that's not necessary and that you can just be exactly as you are. You don't need to figure out who that is. Just be it.